My husband left the signed divorce papers on the cold Calcutta marble of our kitchen island, kissed me lightly on the forehead, and told me he was flying to the Bahamas for a 3-day business retreat. The kiss was what made me suspicious. Julian Vance had not touched me with genuine tenderness in nearly 6 months. His hand had become accustomed to passing me in hallways, his eyes accustomed to sliding over me as if I were another expensive fixture in our $20 million Tribeca penthouse. That final kiss did not feel affectionate. It felt ceremonial, almost grateful. The way a man might touch the polished hood of a car before abandoning it at the edge of a cliff. "Try to get some rest, Sarah," he said, lifting his leather travel bag. "You look exhausted." Then he walked out without turning around. I remained beside the kitchen island, staring at the pages he had left near the silver fruit bowl. His signature was real. I knew every curve of it. I had watched him sign hundreds of contracts, investor agreements, anniversary cards, and checks large enough to purchase entire apartment buildings. The filing stamp at the bottom of the divorce petition was not real. It was close. Convincing enough for someone heartbroken, frightened, or legally inexperienced. But the date code contained one extra digit, and the clerk identification number belonged to a matrimonial court office that had closed 18 months earlier. Julian had signed the divorce papers. He had not filed them. Legally, I was still his wife. 38 seconds later, my phone vibrated. It was an automated notification from the insurance company covering Vanguard Zenith Capital's corporate aircraft. Julian had listed me as an emergency contact years earlier after suffering a minor medical incident in Singapore. Apparently, he had remembered to remove me from his future, but forgotten to remove me from the policy. The flight plan had been amended that morning. Teterboro Airport to Nassau. One-way international departure. 2 listed passengers. Julian Vance. Chloe Mercer. There was no executive team, no return itinerary, no conference registration, no hotel reservation under Vanguard Zenith. Only my husband and the 24-year-old former executive assistant whose name had appeared too frequently on private dining receipts, yacht club invitations, and client entertainment invoices. I did not scream. I did not throw my espresso against the panoramic windows or collapse onto the wide plank oak floors of the home I had spent 7 years believing we owned together. I carried the divorce papers to my custom-built workstation, sat down beneath the cold glow of 6 monitors, and began checking the numbers. I am a senior forensic risk valuation accountant. I have spent most of my adult life searching for lies concealed beneath respectable balance sheets. I know that money is rarely dishonest by itself. People are dishonest. Money merely records the route they took. It took me less than 3 minutes to establish that Julian was not traveling for business. It took another 7 to discover that the Gulfstream had requested permission to remain outside United States jurisdiction indefinitely. At 8:14 that morning, my father called from Ohio. Arthur Bennett was not a man who frightened easily. He had operated a small hardware store for 42 years, survived 2 recessions, a warehouse fire, spinal surgery, and the arrival of a Home Depot 12 miles outside town. He regarded panic as something invented by people who had never repaired their own roofs. Yet his voice sounded strangely careful. He and my mother had received an automated notice from their retirement custodian. Their account at Vanguard Zenith showed a 0 balance. He assumed it was a system error. Julian's office was not answering, and he did not want to bother me over something so small. Something so small. My parents' retirement account contained $1.2 million. It was the result of 4 decades of skipped vacations, repaired appliances, secondhand cars, and envelopes of cash my mother quietly hid from herself because she knew she would otherwise spend the money on her students. My father had lifted crates until the discs in his back collapsed. My mother had tutored children for free long after the school buses left. They had built that account one ordinary sacrifice at a time. 2 years earlier, Julian had persuaded them to place every dollar under his management. He had stood beside my father at Thanksgiving, one hand resting warmly on Arthur's shoulder, and promised him access to a proprietary municipal bond portfolio normally reserved for institutional investors. Family privilege, he had called it. Julian had looked directly into my father's eyes and said he protected his own. I told Dad not to contact Vanguard again until I understood what had happened. I assured him it might still be a reporting problem. I kept my voice steady until the call ended. Then I opened the archived audit environment from the cybersecurity review my firm had conducted for Vanguard Zenith 3 years earlier. I did not enter the live network. Not yet. Instead, I examined the legally retained transaction snapshots, certificate histories, compliance reports, and settlement maps stored in my own encrypted system. The first irregularity appeared inside a supposedly conservative municipal income fund. It had reported gains during market days when the underlying securities had barely moved. Those gains had not come from bond interest. They had come from new investor deposits. I followed the capital backward, then forward, then sideways through shell entities designed to make forward and backward meaningless. Within an hour, Vanguard Zenith Capital ceased to resemble an investment firm. It became what it had always been beneath the mahogany conference tables, glossy brochures, private golf outings, and charitable galas. A Ponzi scheme. The aggressive biotech fund Julian had blamed for his sleepless nights did not exist. Neither did the proprietary artificial intelligence trading engine he presented to investors. Early clients had been paid with money taken from later clients. Losses were hidden inside Delaware holding companies, Irish software firms, Luxembourg debt vehicles, and Cayman trusts bearing names so deliberately dull that most auditors would have ignored them. Julian had not built a financial empire. He had built a hall of mirrors. And for 3 years, everyone had admired the reflections. I found my parents' account buried beneath 14 internal transfers. Their $1.2 million had been liquidated 3 weeks earlier, passed through 2 dummy consulting firms, and sent to an escrow account controlled by a marine brokerage in Monaco. The purchase contract referenced a 90-foot yacht. The registered buyer was Mercer Horizon Holdings. Chloe Mercer. For several seconds, my hands remained suspended above the keyboard. I pictured my father sitting on an overturned bucket in the back of his store, rubbing his lower spine after closing. I pictured my mother cutting coupons beneath the kitchen light. Their entire working lives had become a deposit on a floating playground for my husband's mistress. That discovery did not break me. The next one nearly did. The transfer had been approved using my digital certificate. I checked the certificate number twice, then a third time. It was not merely attached to my parents' transaction. My authorization credentials appeared on 23 offshore transfers, totaling more than $180 million. The system identified me as the independent risk consultant who had reviewed and approved the movements. Julian had not underestimated my profession. He had weaponized it. The divorce papers, the unfiled petition, the one-way flight, the transactions bearing my signature, none of it was accidental. He intended to disappear while leaving me legally tied to his company, professionally connected to its systems, and digitally responsible for its largest fraudulent transfers. When federal investigators arrived, they would not find an abandoned wife. They would find the forensic accountant who had designed the architecture. My phone rang from a blocked number. Julian's voice entered the room with the same smooth confidence that had persuaded investors to hand him hundreds of millions of dollars. You always did wake up early when the math bothered you. I looked at the replicated certificate displayed across my center monitor. You cloned my credentials. He did not deny it. Instead, he reminded me that a federal jury would see my name, my biometric authentication phrase, and my certificate history. He said that grief had made many wives irrational, and ambition had made many accountants dishonest. Then I asked him why he had stolen from my parents. For the first time, his voice hardened. They made an investment. You bought Chloe a yacht. A brief silence followed. Then he laughed. It was not the laughter of a cornered man. It was the laughter of someone pleased that the trap had worked. Before ending the call, he warned me not to interfere with a process I did not fully understand. At exactly 5 o'clock, the remaining assets would pass beyond the reach of American courts. If I contacted the government too soon, he would make certain my parents' money disappeared first. The line went dead. I immediately forwarded the recording, flight notice, forged filing stamp, and preliminary transaction analysis to Special Agent Lena Ramirez of the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. Ramirez and I had worked together on 2 previous fraud investigations. She respected my judgment, but respect is not immunity. She confirmed that a preliminary case had already been opened after several Vanguard clients reported delayed withdrawals. She also confirmed that my credentials appeared throughout the suspicious transfers. Until I proved those credentials had been cloned, I was not merely a witness. I was a person of interest. The distinction altered everything. The FBI could begin seeking warrants, but federal procedure did not move at the speed of fleeing money. Even with an emergency petition, obtaining access to Vanguard's internal servers, offshore settlement records, and physical authorization devices could take hours. Julian had designed the deadline around that delay. I needed someone with immediate contractual standing inside Vanguard. The answer was Elias Thorne. Elias controlled Thorne Strategic Holdings, a private investment firm known for acquiring distressed companies, dismantling fraudulent management teams, and turning corporate funerals into profitable transactions. He was Vanguard Zenith's largest institutional investor, with $50 million placed inside Julian's flagship fund. More importantly, Elias possessed rights under Vanguard's shareholder agreement that ordinary investors did not. If the company's reported assets were proven materially false, he could petition for an emergency board intervention and request the appointment of an independent receiver. But he would need evidence. I had the evidence. He had the standing. At 10:47 that morning, I entered the Century Club in Midtown carrying a leather briefcase and the knowledge that my freedom might depend on convincing one of the most suspicious men in New York that I had not helped steal his money. Elias sat at a private table beneath dark wood paneling, reading a financial newspaper beside an untouched cup of coffee. He was younger than most people imagined, perhaps in his late 40s, with silver beginning at his temples, and an expression so controlled that anger would have seemed almost theatrical on him. His security staff intercepted me before I reached the table. I gave them one sentence. Tell Mr. Thorne that Julian Vance stole $50 million from him and arranged for his wife to be blamed. Elias allowed me 30 seconds. I used 27. I placed the evidence before him, identified the Ponzi structure, explained the 5 o'clock settlement deadline, and showed him the transfers bearing my credentials. He did not react when he saw his own missing $50 million. He reacted when he saw my signature. His eyes lifted from the page and settled on me with quiet, surgical distrust. The possibility that I was Julian's accomplice had already occurred to him. Of course it had. A less intelligent man would have believed my anger. Elias believed documents. For the next 10 minutes, he examined the file without speaking. He understood enough financial architecture to recognize the fraud immediately. He also understood that the same evidence implicated me. When he finally closed the folder, he asked why he should grant any authority to the woman whose approval appeared on every stolen transfer. I did not ask him to trust me. I asked him to place me under supervision. That answer interested him more than denial would have. Under Vanguard's operating agreement, Elias could initiate an emergency vote, but his investment was held through a family-controlled entity whose internal rules prevented him from assigning executive voting authority to an unrelated third party without a lengthy approval process. A legal spouse qualified as a related controlling person. The marriage itself would not grant me access. That would have been absurdly convenient and legally indefensible. But if Elias married me, his holding company could approve a limited spousal power of attorney within minutes. He could then petition the court to appoint an independent receiver and designate me as the receiver's forensic advisor. My authority would remain narrow, documented, supervised, and revocable. The evidence, not the marriage, would justify the seizure. The marriage would merely allow Elias to place the necessary voting power behind it before Julian's deadline expired. There was another complication. I was still legally married to Julian. Fortunately, the false court stamp, his recorded admission, and evidence of imminent flight gave my attorney enough grounds to seek emergency dissolution based on fraud. Elias's attorneys began moving before he had formally agreed. That was how men like Elias communicated decisions. They did not announce them. The room simply reorganized around their intent. He warned me that if I had fabricated any portion of the evidence, he would personally ensure I spent the rest of my life in federal prison. I told him that if I had fabricated it, I deserved nothing less. At 11:58, a Manhattan judge granted the emergency dissolution of my marriage to Julian. At 12:14, Elias Thorne and I stood beneath fluorescent lights in a municipal office with 2 attorneys, a board clerk, and no flowers. The ceremony lasted 9 minutes. There was no romance in it, no trembling vows, no promise of forever. It was a temporary legal alliance between 2 people who had both been robbed by the same man. The second our marriage certificate was issued, Elias executed a limited power of attorney. His holding company approved the conflict waiver. His attorneys filed the emergency shareholder petition with the federal evidence attached. At 12:49, a judge issued a preservation order, appointed an independent receiver, and authorized a supervised team to secure Vanguard Zenith systems. For the first time that day, Julian's plan encountered something it had not anticipated. Not my grief, not my intelligence. A coalition. At 1:31, the executive elevator opened on Vanguard Zenith's 50th floor. I stepped into the trading area beside Elias, Agent Ramirez, the court-appointed receiver, and a team of federal technicians. Employees looked up from their monitors one by one. Conversations died across the room as the letters on the agents' jackets became visible. Julian's chief financial officer, Greg Halpern, emerged from his office carrying a red folder. He had always possessed the damp complexion of a man permanently expecting bad news. The sight of me transformed expectation into certainty. He tried to call security. Ramirez handed him the court order instead. Within minutes, the exits were controlled, the live servers isolated, and employees removed from their terminals. No one was arrested immediately. That would come after the evidence decided who had been ignorant, who had been frightened, and who had been paid. I entered Julian's glass-walled office and sat behind the desk, where he had built his reputation. His cologne still lingered in the room. For 7 years, that scent had belonged to the man I loved. Now it belonged to an evidence bag. The live system was far more complex than the archive snapshots. Julian had created genuine pathways, decoy accounts, automatic destruction protocols, and layers of settlement instructions designed to waste investigators' time. The 5 o'clock deadline was real, but it was not a universal banking rule. It belonged specifically to a private offshore escrow. At 5, the remaining assets would convert into a form of bearer-controlled digital custody. Once released, the money would not become legally invisible, but retrieving it could take years and require cooperation from jurisdictions designed not to cooperate. The settlement required 2 hardware authentication factors. One belonged to Julian. The other belonged to Chloe. Her name did not merely decorate the yacht company. She had been placed at the center of the offshore structure. For the next 90 minutes, I worked beneath federal observation. Every keystroke was logged. Every search required approval. Every discovery strengthened the case against Julian, while reminding everyone in the room that my certificate remained embedded throughout the fraud. Then the live system produced its most damaging piece of evidence. 6 weeks earlier, my digital certificate had been renewed from the internet address of our Tribeca penthouse. The renewal included my face, my voice, my office. A video showed me sitting at my workstation and repeating the exact biometric phrase required to approve the certificate. I remembered recording it. Julian had brought home a prototype security program and asked me to test its voice recognition system. I had spoken the phrase while he stood behind my chair, smiling at the demonstration. He had used the recording to construct a fraudulent renewal. The explanation was plausible. It was not yet proof. The original metadata had been stripped. The administrative approval came from Greg Halpern's physical token, but Greg insisted I had instructed him to authorize it. For several minutes, the room changed around me. The agents did not accuse me. They did not need to. Their posture became more formal. Ramirez stopped using my first name. Elias watched in silence, knowing that the woman he had married less than 2 hours earlier might still be the architect of the crime. That was the moment Julian's plan nearly succeeded. Not because the evidence was perfect, because doubt is cheaper than proof and spreads faster. At 3:32, the offshore system announced that the settlement deadline had been moved forward to 4:15. Julian knew we had entered the network. At 3:36, Teterboro Airport confirmed that his aircraft had requested an earlier departure slot. He was compressing the timeline, forcing the authorities to choose between preserving the funds and arresting him before takeoff. Then I located my parents' $1.2 million. The account was a decoy. The Monaco yacht escrow contained a matching loan entry designed to appear like their stolen capital. The actual money had been moved 2 days earlier into a Bahamian charitable foundation controlled through Chloe's digital identity. Julian had anticipated that I would pursue the most personal theft first. He had used my love for my parents to direct me toward the wrong account. For the first time that day, I had not merely been delayed. I had been defeated. My father called while the false account remained open across the monitors. I answered because I could no longer pretend the situation was a routine error. He had seen Vanguard mentioned on television. Reporters were already gathering outside the building. He knew my name had been connected to the company. When I tried to apologize, he stopped me. He told me to let the money go. My parents had saved it because they wanted security for the people they loved. They had not spent 42 years building an account so that their daughter could destroy herself recovering it. Then my father said the only sentence that nearly broke me. "You are not what he stole from us, Sarah." After the call, I remained alone in the conference room for several moments, staring through the glass at the Manhattan skyline. Elias entered without speaking. He placed a signed receivership instruction on the table. It directed that if the missing assets were recovered, individual retirement accounts and smaller private investors would be reimbursed before Thorn Strategic received a single dollar of its $50 million. He had signed it before we entered Vanguard, before he knew whether I was innocent, before he knew whether anything could be recovered. That document did more to earn my trust than 1,000 declarations of loyalty. At 3:48, Julian initiated a video call. He appeared inside the Gulf Stream, sitting beneath soft cabin, lighting with a glass of champagne in his hand. Chloe sat several seats behind him. Her designer coat, immaculate makeup, and carefully arranged hair could not hide the fear tightening her face. Julian congratulated me on my new marriage. Then he offered a trade. If I recorded a statement claiming that I had designed Vanguard's offshore structure and authorized the transfers, he would return my parents' money through a separate trust. The confession would be sent simultaneously to the board, the SEC, and the press. He had prepared my role perfectly. The brilliant wife who had manipulated her charismatic husband, the forensic accountant who had hidden behind his public image, the ambitious woman who had murdered a company and then framed the man she married. Julian knew the story would sell because people preferred female cunning to male banality. A wife secretly designing a billion-dollar fraud was more exciting than another wealthy man stealing because he believed rules belonged to other people. I asked to see proof that the Bahamian Foundation still held the money. He initially refused. I let him believe fear was weakening me. Eventually, he sent a temporary viewing link. The account held approximately $186 million, including the exact balance removed from my parents' portfolio. More importantly, the temporary session exposed the custody platform's active connection address. Federal technicians began tracing it immediately. Julian gave me 10 minutes to confess. Before the call ended, I studied Chloe. She was not looking at me. She was looking at Julian, not with affection, with the growing suspicion of someone beginning to understand that she had never been a passenger in his escape plan. She was baggage. I searched the Foundation's survivorship documents and found the clause within 4 minutes. Chloe's name appeared throughout the ownership records, but her control terminated upon arrest, separation from Julian, reputational damage, incapacity, or breach of confidential duty. Julian remained the permanent beneficiary. He had placed the visible accounts in Chloe's name, so prosecutors would reach her first. Once the assets were converted, he could remove her with a single legal declaration. He had never intended to share the money. He had intended to share the indictment. I sent the clause directly to the phone paired with Chloe's authentication token. Beneath it, I wrote only one sentence. He did not put you in the escape plan. He put you in the evidence. Julian called seconds later. His calmness had begun to fracture. He accused me of manipulating Chloe. I reminded him that manipulation only worked when it confirmed something the victim had already begun to fear. Then I agreed to record the confession. The room around me went still. Ramirez understood before Elias did. She signaled the technicians to continue tracing the open session. I faced the camera and began speaking slowly, giving Julian the words he wanted while withholding the sentences that would make the confession complete. At 3:57, the offshore platform received Chloe's authentication request. For one terrible second, it appeared that she had approved the settlement. Then the transaction reversed direction. Instead of releasing the money, Chloe activated a beneficiary dispute and requested an emergency compliance hold. She uploaded the survivorship clause, declared that Julian had misrepresented the ownership structure, and reported that both physical authentication devices were in his possession. The custody platform froze the assets for review. It was not a permanent victory. It was time. Ramirez ordered the airport operation to move. At Teterboro, a convoy of federal vehicles entered the restricted tarmac and boxed the Gulf Stream between two taxiways. Air traffic control withdrew its departure clearance. The pilots powered down the engines. From the live cabin connection, we watched Julian realize that the plane was no longer moving. The transformation was almost elegant. Confidence became confusion. Confusion became rage. Rage became fear. At 4:07, federal attorneys submitted the captured session, the investor records, Chloe's dispute notice, and the court's preservation order to the custody platform. At 4:12, the $186 million foundation account was locked under international asset preservation procedures. At 4:14, 1 minute before the revised settlement deadline, the final confirmation turned red. Transfer denied. For several seconds, no one in Julian's office spoke. The empire had not vanished. It had stopped. The Gulfstream's cabin door opened. Chloe emerged first with both hands raised. She was crying so violently that an agent had to guide her down the stairs. Julian appeared behind her, still holding one of the physical authentication devices. He shouted about unlawful detention, diplomatic consequences, investor lawsuits, and the importance of his name. Then he saw the agents photographing the token in his hand. He had carried the evidence out with him. Elias asked whether I wanted to go to the airport and face him. I looked at Julian's image on the live screen. He had spent 7 years using attention as oxygen. Every negotiation, every betrayal, every apology had been built around forcing people to stand before him while he controlled what the moment meant. Going to the airport would give him one final stage. I declined. Julian called me from an agent's phone before they placed him in the vehicle. He tried anger first, then explanation, then memory, then love. The sequence was so familiar that I wondered how I had ever mistaken it for emotion. He insisted Elias had married me because I was useful. He said powerful men did not love women like me, they deployed us. Perhaps a few hours earlier, the words might have entered somewhere vulnerable. But Elias had already placed the retirees ahead of his own 50 million when he still believed I might be guilty. Julian could not understand that decision because sacrifice had never appeared on any ledger he respected. I told him why he had lost. He believed everyone had a price. Chloe had fear. Elias had principles. My parents had love. Julian had mistaken all three for weaknesses because he recognized only leverage. Then I ended the call. The investigation lasted 11 months. Greg Halpern surrendered his administrative token and eventually admitted that Julian had ordered him to renew my certificate. Building access records placed Julian inside Greg's office during the authorization window. A forensic reconstruction of the biometric video revealed fragments of the original home security demonstration from which my voice and image had been taken. Each discovery removed another piece of the architecture built around me. Greg negotiated a reduced sentence in exchange for corporate records. Chloe cooperated after learning that Julian's attorneys intended to portray her as the creator of the offshore network. She was not innocent. She had accepted gifts, signed documents she did not understand, concealed their affair, and enjoyed money whose origins she had never cared to question. But she had not designed the fraud. More importantly, her compliance hold had preserved the largest remaining pool of investor assets. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy and tax-related charges and received a substantial sentence, though far less than Julian expected her to carry for him. The Vanguard scandal became the financial story of the year. Reporters described the penthouses, the yacht, the private aircraft, and the luxury accounts with breathless fascination. They treated wealth as both crime and scenery. Julian's photograph appeared across television screens beneath increasingly creative descriptions of greed. His defense attorneys argued that extraordinary market losses had forced temporary accounting measures. They claimed aggressive prosecutors had transformed a liquidity crisis into a criminal conspiracy. My forensic report destroyed that argument one transfer at a time. The fraud had not been temporary. It had been deliberate, expanding, and designed for escape. The government introduced the false divorce filing, the clone certificate, the survivorship clause, the recorded threat against my parents' account, and the physical token found in Julian's hand at the aircraft door. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Julian Vance was convicted of securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, obstruction of justice, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 32 years in federal prison. He entered the courtroom wearing the same kind of dark, perfectly fitted suit that had once made investors feel safe. He left wearing handcuffs. My parents recovered every dollar of their $1.2 million after the court completed the tracing process. They also received a legally calculated return from the liquidation of Julian's remaining legitimate assets. My father paid off the small mortgage he had kept because he disliked removing money from investments. My mother replaced the kitchen cabinets she had postponed repairing for 12 years. Then they rented a quiet house beside Lake Michigan. My mother sent me a photograph of my father asleep in a wooden chair near the water, his hands resting loosely over his stomach, his old hardware store cap covering his eyes. Beneath the picture, she wrote that this was what the money had always been for. Not yachts, not status, peace. As for my 9-minute strategic marriage to Elias Thorne, it did not end immediately after the crisis. There were practical reasons at first. The receivership remained active. The power of attorney documents required careful separation. Reporters had discovered the municipal certificate, and an instant annulment would have created additional speculation during the investigation. We told ourselves the delay was administrative. Then weeks became months. I accepted a temporary position assisting the receiver. Later, Elias offered me the role of Chief Risk Officer at Thorn Strategic Holdings. I did not accept until his board approved a contract, guaranteeing my independence and prohibiting him from overruling formal risk findings without a recorded vote. He called the requirement hostile. I called it marriage counseling. Our relationship developed without the dramatic declarations popular stories assigned to powerful people. Elias did not rescue me. He challenged me, doubted me, supervised me, and eventually trusted me because the evidence justified it. I did not soften him. I discovered that much of his coldness was discipline rather than cruelty. He quietly contacted my father's surgeon before Arthur's second back procedure and arranged for an independent medical review. He never told me. My mother did. When a financial magazine described me as the abandoned wife who married a richer man before lunch, Elias issued a single public statement. Mrs. Thorne was the architect of the recovery, not a passenger in it. He refused every request for further comment. Nearly 1 year after Julian's arrest, I found Elias standing inside my office after midnight. A small black box rested on top of the quarterly risk report I had left open on my desk. The diamond inside was elegant, severe, and far smaller than the theatrical stone Julian would have selected to impress strangers. Elias did not kneel. Neither of us would have survived the awkwardness. He said our first marriage had been created by fraud, emergency, and necessity. It had been useful, legally precise, and emotionally meaningless. Everything afterward had become inconveniently real. He did not tell me that I was terrifying or ruthless. He had already seen those qualities. They were the easiest parts of me to admire from a distance. Instead, he said he loved the woman who called her parents every night, checked every figure twice, woke from nightmares without admitting she had dreamed, and still placed strangers' retirement accounts ahead of institutional capital. He wanted me to choose the marriage when no deadline required it. I examined the ring, then the man standing before me. The first husband I loved had treated trust as access. Elias treated trust as something that had to be earned, documented, tested, and protected. I told him the original partnership agreement required amendments, equal authority over shared assets, no unilateral acquisition exceeding $1 billion, mandatory Sunday dinner with my parents whenever we were in Ohio. He objected most strongly to the second condition and feared the third. Eventually, he accepted all of them. I placed the ring on my finger. The first time I married Elias Thorne, I did it because my husband had stolen $500 million, framed me for the crime, and planned to escape before sunset. The second time, no money was moving, no aircraft was waiting, no federal agents were standing outside the door. I chose him because Julian had taught me what power without loyalty could destroy. Elias taught me what power with loyalty could protect. A perfect ledger is not one in which nothing is lost. It is one in which every loss is finally placed where it belongs. Julian lost his empire, his freedom, and the woman he had believed too, trusting to fight back. My parents recovered the peace he tried to steal. The investors recovered the truth hidden beneath his numbers. And I recovered something I had not realized was missing until the morning he kissed my forehead and walked away. My own name.